Artemovsk. That's the claim made by a Russian-backed official. The Wagner Group says it fully controls this Ukrainian city and will hand it over to the Russian army by June. Kiev disputes this. Will Pakistan ban Imran Khan's party? Shehbaz Sharif's government is mulling it. Defence Minister Khwaja Asif says the attack on military buildings by Imran Khan's supporters was pre-planned, and that's grounds to consider banning the PTI. In India, the Modi government and the opposition face off over the new parliament. 19 opposition parties, including the Congress, will boycott the opening of the new building on Sunday. The opposition is angry that Prime Minister Modi will be inaugurating the new parliament and not the President of India. The UK Prime Minister rules out an ethics probe for Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Rishi Sunak says Braverman's handling of a speeding offence did not breach rules. She was caught speeding last year. And 50 million people are trapped in modern slavery. North Korea, Eritrea and Mauritania are the worst offenders. 28 million people are in forced labor and 22 million in a forced marriage. These are the findings of the 2023 Global Slavery Index. Day 2 of Prime Minister Modi's visit to Australia. Yesterday, the mega reception captured the headlines. Today, the leaders got down to business. Prime Ministers Albanese and Modi held talks. Now, usually bilateral talks are a mundane affair, largely about diplomatic statements and bilateral agreements. But today was different. Today, we have significant outcomes to report. The first big takeaway is this: Prime Minister Modi's strong message on separatism, the pro-Khalistan elements and the attacks on Indian temples in Australia. In recent months, we witnessed a spate of such incidents. Hindu temples across Australia have been vandalized. Since January, at least 4 Hindu temples have been attacked. And who was behind them? Khalistani separatists, groups and individuals who want to divide India, who want a separate country for Sikhs carved out of the Indian state of Punjab. The Khalistan movement has been a violent one. It's been outlawed in India, but it has taken root in the West, mostly in countries like Canada, the UK, the US, and now Australia. In a lot of these cases, separatists operate with the backing of Pakistan. They're funded and supported by forces who want to hurt India. And New Delhi sees these overseas Khalistanis as a clear national security challenge. So India has reacted sharply to attacks on its diplomatic missions and Hindu temples. It has demanded swift action against the perpetrators. It has asked governments to crack down on them. Prime Minister Modi raised the issue again today with his Australian counterpart.
ऑस्ट्रेलिया में मंदिरों पर होने वाले हमलों और अलगाववादी तत्वों की गतिविधियों के संबंध में हमने पहले भी बात की थी और आज भी हमने बात की है। भारत और ऑस्ट्रेलिया के सौहार्दपूर्ण रिश्तों को कोई भी तत्व अपने विचारों या अपने एक्शन से आघात पहुंचाए, ये हमें स्वीकार्य नहीं है।
It is important to act decisively and urgently. You see, the Indian community in Australia is growing, especially the Sikh community. In 2016, there were 130,000 Sikhs in Australia. 5 years later, in 2021, that number shot up to 210,000. India fears that this community is vulnerable. If separatists are allowed to operate freely, they will target the Sikh community. They will exploit these numbers to revive the Khalistan movement. Prime Minister Albanese of Australia has repeatedly given a personal assurance to check this. He has vowed to use every available resource to crack down on Khalistanis. And the fact that Indian Prime Minister Modi brought it up again shows how seriously New Delhi views this. So separatism was high on the agenda, but there was much more to the conversation today between the two leaders. The second big takeaway from today's meeting is a migration deal. India and Australia signed this deal today. It will significantly improve India's access to Australia. This deal will benefit students, graduates, academic researchers and business owners. How? By ensuring more visas and easier travel rules. Australia will create a new type of visa, a 3-month temporary visa exclusively for Indian nationals. This will be for people who want to visit Australia to see family members who are working or studying there. And that's not all. Business visas will now enable longer stay. Plus, there will be yet another type of visa for academics and specialists. All in all, easier access to Australia. The third major takeaway is on the security front. India and Australia are seeking more synergy. They have a common security challenge called China. Through military and diplomatic moves, the Communist Party of China has threatened the security of both India and Australia, even challenged their sovereignty. Now, this issue was supposed to come up during the Quad summit. The Quad, as you would know, is a multilateral grouping with 4 members: India, Australia, the United States and Japan. Their leaders were supposed to meet in Sydney today. But Biden changed his plans at the last moment and the summit had to be called off. So Modi and Albanese took up some of the Quad agenda in today's meeting. They recognized the threat from China without naming it, and they reaffirmed their commitment to protecting the Indo-Pacific.
Quad leaders stand together for an open, stable, secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. A region where sovereignty is respected and all countries, large and small, benefit from a regional balance that keeps the peace.
So those were the important takeaways. They also discussed cooperation on mining and critical minerals. There's talk of an Australia-India green hydrogen task force, plus a trade deal. They're close to signing one. It could happen by the end of this year. And all of this shows how India's relationship with Australia is evolving. Prime Minister Modi described it best.
पिछले 1 साल में ये हमारी 6ठी मुलाकात है। अगर क्रिकेट की भाषा में मैं कहूं तो हमारे संबंध T20 मोड में आ गए हैं।
Our ties have entered the T20 mode, he said, meaning just like a fast-paced T20 game, bold and rapid changes are being made to redefine the India-Australia relationship. Wars are fought on the battlefield, but they're won behind closed doors. I'm talking about diplomacy. If you're popular, you win more. If you're isolated, well, not so much. Just ask Ukraine's President Zelensky. His support is mostly in the West. Beyond that, there is sympathy at best, indifference at worst. So what does he do? Try to create new alliances based on different ideas. Clearly, the talk of sovereignty is not helping. So why not try religion? Let me explain. This year, President Zelensky hosted an iftar event. Iftar is the evening meal. Muslims use it to break their Ramadan fast. This year, Zelensky also participated. He said Ukraine respects the traditions of Ramadan. He also accused Russia of mistreating Crimean Muslims. Listen to this.
Let's not forget that Russia's attempt to enslave Ukraine began from the occupation of our Ukrainian Crimea. From repressions in Crimea of Ukrainians, Crimean Tatars, and of Crimean Muslims.
Now, for the record, he's never done this before. Zelensky was elected in the year 2019. The war began in 2022. So why did the iftar tradition begin only this year? Maybe it's a late but genuine outreach. Maybe it's a political strategy. Or who knows, maybe a bit of both. Ukraine's Muslim population is just 1%, but in Crimea, they make up more than 12% of the population. And their past is traumatic. In 1944, Crimean Tatar Muslims were forced into exile. They were packed into cattle trains and transported to Central Asia. The reason? Historians are not sure, but some say Soviet leader Stalin was paranoid. He did not want minorities in border areas. It was only after the Soviet Union fell that many of these people returned. My point is, they still hold a grudge. In 2014, Russia held a referendum after invading Crimea. The Muslims boycotted it. Moscow also banned the elected assembly of Tatars. So the dislike is mutual. Could Zelensky be trying to weaponize that, to recruit Crimean Muslims in the war against Russia? That's one possible strategy. The other one is to build support in West Asia. Most of those countries have refused to criticize Russia. Some are actively supporting it. And why is that a problem for Zelensky? Why does he need West Asia? because of two major factors. Number one, political support. West Asia and North Africa is home to 20-plus countries. If they support Zelensky, it would boost his position, give him more legitimacy. Factor number two, they have leverage. West Asian countries are also oil producers. They have a cartel called OPEC. OPEC plus if you count Russia and others. Guess who's also in the same business? Russia, of course. Most of Moscow's money is coming from energy. If OPEC can clip that, it would help Ukraine. Maybe even slow down the Russian war machine. So support in West Asia is key, which is why Zelensky visited Saudi Arabia last week. He attended the Arab League summit. He asked the member states to criticize Russia. Guess how many did that? None. Zelensky's Islamic outreach is a good idea on paper, but it faces a couple of challenges. One, of course, is realpolitik. West Asian countries are more practical than ever before. They could use Russia's help for a number of reasons: to keep Syria stable, to put indirect pressure on Iran, to fix oil prices. Ukraine offers none of that. Secondly, there is no political outcry for the Muslims in Ukraine. It may sound heartless, but it's true. Why does the Arab world stand with Palestine? At least on paper, they do. Because there is support among their citizens. Well, that's not the case in Ukraine. For most West Asian citizens, the war in Ukraine doesn't impact them. In fact, the oil price rise enriches them. If you think that's cruel, well, don't. These same Western countries have invaded, partitioned and hurt West Asia. There was no outrage then. But coming back to Zelensky, if he's really playing the Islamic card, it's no surprise. Wartime leaders should try everything. Plus, hosting an iftar dinner is encouraging, war or no war. As for the outcome, we haven't seen anything yet. The Arab League invitation was a good start. Let's see if something concrete comes out of it. A perfect storm is brewing in America. The US government might soon run out of cash. Investors are preparing for a government default. And if that wasn't enough, now doubts are being raised over American warplanes. A big lapse has come to light at the Pentagon. Spare parts worth millions of dollars are missing. They're unaccounted for. And the Pentagon cannot come up with an explanation. Which parts are these? They are for the F-35 fighter jet, the most advanced warplane in the world. Also America's most important weapon as of today. If there's a war, if there's a need to demonstrate air power, the F-35 will be seen in action. But to keep that warplane ready for battle, the US must maintain an inventory for spare parts. Recently, this inventory was audited, and it was found that thousands of parts were missing. In fact, I have some numbers. More than 1 million spare parts of the F-35 have been lost. Do you know how much they're worth? More than $85 million, and that's just the loss from one contractor. So the actual loss could be much higher, and it's hard to come up with an estimate. Do you know why? Because the Pentagon doesn't keep any books. There are no records. The US government has no way to track where the parts are going. Remember, we're talking about the world's most powerful military with the biggest budget and supposedly the best technology. But they cannot explain where their parts are going. How difficult is it to maintain an Excel sheet? Well, it turns out they did not have one in the first place. And this is quite a mess. Do you know how the US manages these spare parts? They have a single consolidated pool. It is used by America and its allies. Now, how many countries use the F-35? Apart from the US, at least 8 others. As of 2020, these countries used the fighter jet F-35. The United Kingdom, Italy, the Netherlands, Australia, Norway, Israel, Japan, and South Korea. They were all operating the F-35. Of course, America has sold these planes to more countries than these, but they don't own any spare parts. All of them depend on American supplies, at least on paper. When they need a spare part, like engines, tires, landing gears, bolts, screws, fasteners, they turn to the US, and they have those parts delivered. Now, this inventory or central pool is massive. It is spread out across the world. Reports say the parts are held in more than 50 locations across the world. They could be inside facilities of subcontractors or US military bases, both at home and abroad, or even facilities of foreign partners. And who makes these planes? A company called Lockheed Martin. The US government relies on this company to also keep track of the parts. But like I said, a recent audit showed that parts are missing. The Pentagon was asked about this, and they couldn't explain it. The Pentagon has an F-35 program office, an entire department looking after all things F-35. Reports say they don't have any accountability over the parts. What's worse, this is not a first. For at least 5 years now, the US military has been failing this accountability audit. 5 years, and they haven't been able to get this right. Although they have started keeping some records now, but the entire process is riddled with holes. In fact, let me quote from the last audit. This is what it says. Although the F-35 program office has taken initial steps to establish property records after spending approximately $12 million to conduct the inventory, it was unable to provide the cost, total quantity, and locations of spare parts in the global spares pool. As a result of this lack of accountability, the total value and quantity of the spare parts is currently unknown. Meaning, they don't know how many spare parts are there and how much they're worth. Perhaps more than new weapons, the US military needs some accountants. The way they're going, it won't inspire confidence among allies. Look at how America is poised today. They're locked in a proxy war against Russia, whether they admit to it or not. And they're locked in an escalating Cold War with the Chinese. America may not go into battle directly anytime soon, but it must be prepared for one. As of today, it doesn't look prepared. Let me show you another report. This is from November last year. It says US warplanes are not combat ready. Only 4 out of 49 warplanes met combat requirements. And now a new report says they have 1 million spare parts missing and they don't know where they went. How would you assess a force like this? We'd like to hear from you. The Pentagon may be in trouble, but it's nothing compared to the White House. I'm talking about the debt ceiling. There is still no progress. It's the most nervous build-up for a climax we already know. There will be a deal. The only question is, who will blink first? Joe Biden or his Republican opposition? House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says a deal has not been reached, but they will keep working until there is an agreement.
We're not there yet. So, I mean, it's difficult because you've got to be able to, you take a couple days to write the bill, you got 72 hours here, then you got the Senate to act.
And what is the White House saying? They said Tuesday's talks were productive. They also said that a default was off the table. Listen to this.
They both reiterated that default is off the table and only way forward is in good faith and toward a bipartisan budget agreement.
This deadlock has consequences. American stocks closed in the red on Tuesday. Even Indian markets felt the heat. The Sensex dropped 200 points in today's trade. This is what many experts had warned about, that a deal will be reached, but the damage will be done by then. Markets do not really look at political games. They're only concerned about sentiment. In this case, the mood is of uncertainty. One victim of this uncertainty could be the Indian rupee. Experts say the rupee could slip further. And why is that? Because there is more demand for the dollar. The greenback is considered a safe haven, meaning it can withstand economic shocks and uncertainty, which is what investors are looking for. They're spooked by the looming debt deadline. So they are betting on the US dollar, and the rupee could be the collateral. It is trading at 82.66 compared to 82.80 in the previous session, which is good, but it opened higher at 82.83. Now, some outside factors helped the rupee today, but that may not be the case tomorrow because we are expecting more news from the US, this time from the Federal Reserve, their central bank. Minutes from their monthly meeting will be released overnight, and that could influence the markets. There are two possibilities on the table. The Fed can either increase rates again or they can hit the pause button. There have been 10 consecutive interest hikes since last year. So a pause would signal a policy shift. Experts are predicting a 30% chance of rate hike in June. But coming back to the rupee, how will a weaker rupee hurt you and me? Through our imports. When India buys commodities, it uses American dollars. If the dollar is more expensive, our imports cost more. In one word, inflation. So should you be worried? Well, not yet. The Reserve Bank of India seems to have a red line for the rupee. That's 83 against the dollar. So chances are they will intervene to protect that red line. The RBI did it last year as well. But like we keep saying, this is all unnecessary. The debt ceiling is a made-up problem. like a mock United Nations or a costume competition. All this talk is for a problem that should not even technically exist. But that's the United States for you. They sneeze, but you catch the cold. Vantage continues after a short break.
Very fundamental to this controversy. One, that why Rajiv Gandhi inaugurated a parliamentary library and not the president. Congress has no answer. They say that there is a difference between parliament building and the parliament library. There is a difference between parliament annexing and the parliament building. Then why the president was not called? In fact, India is a parliamentary democracy. In parliamentary democracy, Prime Minister is the head of the, not a head of the state, but virtually the executive power is led by the Prime Minister of the country, whether the Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru or Prime Minister Modi.
It's whale hunting season in the Faroe Islands and the pictures are traumatizing. Take a look. Dozens of dead whales are scattered on the beach. The sea is red with blood, but the people are having a good time. What's the story here? First, some background. Faroe Islands is located in the North Atlantic Ocean. It's between Iceland and Norway. The islands are self-governing, but they belong to Denmark. It's a weird situation. Faroe Islands has a tradition of hunting whales. It's an annual event. The locals come together and set out on boats. They surround the dolphins or whales by creating a semicircle, sort of like a wall of boats. Then they gradually push those mammals onto the shore. Once they're beached, they're slaughtered. This month, 2 hunts have been organized. Around 60 whales have been killed so far. You can see why it's controversial. The hunt is primitive, violent, and bloody. Let me tell you what happened in 2021. The hunters spotted a superpod, basically a very large group of whales. That's a superpod. As it turned out, there were 1,428 of them. The whales were boxed in using jet skis and speedboats. All of them were killed. Can you imagine that? More than 1,400 whales killed in a single hunt. Even the government criticized it. They said, quote unquote, aspects of the catch were not satisfactory. I don't know what catch they were talking about. 1,400 kills is not a catch, it's a massacre. So why is the Faroe Islands still doing it? For tradition, they say. Whale hunt dates back to the Vikings. The locals overwhelmingly support it. They say it's part of the culture and the meat is part of their diet. Well, maybe so. But what about the brutality? New laws ban guns and harpoons at sea. So these whales are killed using blades and spikes. Surely the brutality is not part of the culture. The European Union has already outlawed the hunting of pilot whales. But Faroe Islands is self-ruled. EU rules do not apply there. So the hunt continues without any checks. Last year, the local government agreed to limit the kills to 500. But how do you even implement that? How will hunters know which kill is the 500th? It's a piecemeal reform meant to distract. Whales are highly intelligent creatures, but in the last century, they were hunted indiscriminately. Around 3 million whales were killed. The United States led the way. They needed whale blubber as lubricant. In fact, whaling was the 5th largest U.S. industry back then. But in 1986, whaling was banned. Most countries agreed except 3, Japan, Norway, and Iceland. They've killed over 40,000 whales since then. Iceland is having second thoughts. They have promised to stop whaling by 2024, but Japan and Norway still do it. So does Faroe Islands. And I get that culture is very dear to all of us, but at what cost? Does the slaughter of innocent mammals count as culture? And if it does, is that the culture we want the next generation to inherit? And there is no financial angle to this issue. The average salary in Faroe Islands is $60,000 per year. That's 48 lakh rupees, average salary. In Japan, it's $45,000, which translates to 36 lakh rupees. They don't really need whale money to survive, so the question is only of culture. And how do we tackle it? This is a problem that many countries face. Even in India, we have seen traditions being questioned or animal rights groups asking for bans. The truth is, there is no blanket solution. Every cultural practice is different. Every belief is different. The only solution is to take a case-by-case approach. In Faroe Islands, the verdict is clear. The hunt is brutal and unsustainable. You can't use culture to hide your bloodlust. Now let's turn our focus to Kenya, like Chinese hackers seem to be doing. A new report says that Kenya's government data is under attack. Chinese hackers are trying to gather government secrets, especially information related to loan repayments. That's right, loan repayments. If that seems odd, you must remember that Kenya is heavily indebted to China. In 2021, they owed Beijing over $7 billion. It has come down a bit since then, but China is still Kenya's biggest bilateral lender. Also a textbook example of China's debt trap diplomacy. And Kenya is learning it the hard way. The last few years have been punishing. First, it was the Wuhan virus pandemic. Then a war began in Ukraine, and all of this affected the global economy. Those shocks have hit the repayment capacity of indebted nations, nations like Kenya. But China is a loan shark. It can be unforgiving and inflexible when it comes to debt. It refuses to take haircuts. In some cases, it defers payments, but doesn't really forgive them. It delays loan restructuring. It also wants to jump the queue and recover its money first. And now it seems that China has been resorting to espionage to secure its debt. Here's what this report says. Chinese hackers have been targeting Kenya since 2019. And who specifically are they targeting? The Office of the President, the Finance Ministry, the Foreign Ministry, the Defense, Information, Health, Land and Interior Ministries of Kenya, even Kenya's Counter-Terrorism Center. All of them have been a target. It's been a long campaign. It targeted almost every major Kenyan institution. Over the years, Chinese hackers have stolen information from every corner. What for? To figure out Kenya's debt repayment plans, to see how likely it was for Kenya to default. Because that is a major concern. Even though Kenya is one of the more stable East African economies, the Chinese debt burden is significant. This fiscal year, Kenya spent almost $800 million in Chinese debt repayment. That's a 50% increase since last year. It's one of the government's largest expenses, repaying Chinese debt. Most of the money was paid to the Export-Import Bank of China and China Development Bank, and both of these are state-controlled. Which brings us to the next point. Why are Chinese hackers looking at debt owed to the Chinese government? Are they some especially patriotic hackers? Or are they also controlled by the government? The report suggests the latter, that these hackers are controlled by Beijing. They're part of a group unofficially called backdoor diplomacy. And they're seen as an arm of the Chinese state. Their name is a giveaway, backdoor diplomacy. They hack targets to further Beijing's diplomatic goals. And the report we're talking about is based on data from two cybersecurity firms based in Slovakia and the US. Now, here's something else that you should know. China using hackers to target countries is not news. But their usual targets are in Asia and the West, not in Africa. In that sense, the Kenya hacking is noteworthy. It shows how China can go to any lengths to get its money. Of course, Beijing denies all these charges. A government spokesperson has said, and I'm quoting, China is against irresponsible moves that use topics like cybersecurity to sow discord in the relations between China and other developing countries. China is a main victim of cyber theft and attacks and a staunch defender of cybersecurity. And what is Kenya's response? Well, they say this is not a first. Kenya's presidential office has said that they face, quote-unquote, frequent infiltration attempts from Chinese, American and European hackers. The tone and the substance of Kenya's response suggests that it is trying to downplay this hacking scandal. But then again, they owe billions to Beijing. Not kicking up a fuss and focusing on their cyber defenses would be a better strategy at this point. Now let's talk about football, or rather racism in football. The topic is making headlines in Spain. 7 people have been arrested for hate crimes against Real Madrid winger Vinicius Jr. But it only happened after Spanish authorities came under immense pressure to act. It started on Sunday. Vinicius was subjected to racist slurs during a match in Valencia. His team took to social media and demanded justice. Soon support started pouring in from athletes across sports. Then Brazilian President Lula da Silva took it up. He called upon the Spanish authorities to act. Finally, Spain made the arrests. But this may be too little too late. Vinicius is not the only football player who deals with racist chants. The Spanish Football Federation chief has admitted that his country has a racism problem. So what is Spain doing to counter it? And what have other nations done? Here's our report.
The Spanish Football League, home of beautiful footwork, mesmerizing stadiums, and rampant racism. Yes, racism. La Liga has come under intense scrutiny this week after a racist incident on Sunday. This is Real Madrid's Vinicius Jr. He's a star forward from Brazil. He's also the target of brutal racist chants. He regularly faces abuse from the fans of opponent clubs. He's been on the receiving end almost 10 times this season. On Sunday, the situation came to a head. Real Madrid were visiting the eastern city of Valencia, and some of the local fans kept insulting Vinicius throughout the match. It got so bad that the match had to be paused. Madrid's manager, Carlo Ancelotti, even considered substituting him.
I spoke with him during the match because the atmosphere was so heated, so bad. I asked him if he wanted to continue, but even that fact that I have to think about taking him off because there's a racist atmosphere, there's something wrong there. What happened today has happened before, but not quite to that extent. Not like that. It's unacceptable. The Spanish League has a problem.
The Spanish League has a problem. A view that was echoed by even the president of the Spanish Football Federation.
We have a problem. The first thing is to recognize that we have a behavior, education and racism problem in our country. As long as there is a single fan, a single undesirable or a group of undesirables who insult based on sexual condition, skin color, creed, well, we have a serious problem. A serious problem that also stains an entire team, an entire fan base, an entire club and an entire country.
So Spain has taken the first step. It acknowledges the problem. What's next? The league was initially reluctant to act. The referee kept talking about protocol during Sunday's match. The protocol says that the fans have to be warned first. The match can be paused. Then, if the fans don't listen, the match can be cancelled. However, a match has never been cancelled due to racism in Spain, despite numerous instances of racist abuse. Even during Sunday's match, the manager said he faced resistance.
The referee said to me, let him play on. And I said, no, I'm going to take him off because he can't. And he said, no, he has to stay on. We're opening the protocol. We're doing the protocol again. And then it happened again. When they showed him the red card, the whole stadium was shouting, monkey, monkey, monkey. There's not much to say. I am very upset. I've never experienced anything like it.
Yes, you heard right. Vinicius ended up being sent off. He got onto a scuffle during the closing stages of the match. Instead of being empathetic to his plight, the referee decided to show Vinicius a red card. That card has now been overturned. Valencia has also been fined about $50,000. But the red card was symbolic of the rot in Spanish football, victimizing the victim further instead of addressing the issue. Vinicius is getting attention because he spoke up. Support poured in from all quarters. French forward Kylian Mbappe, England's Rio Ferdinand, F1 legend Lewis Hamilton, everyone backed him. Even Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
I think it is important that FIFA, the Spanish League, and leagues in other countries take real action because we cannot allow fascism and racism to dominate football stadiums.
Under fire, the Spanish police was forced to take action. They arrested 3 Valencia fans involved in the racist chanting. They arrested 4 others in Madrid for a different incident. In January, these 4 had hung an effigy of Vinicius near Real's training ground. It's a start, but Europe has to do more to address racism, both in the football field and outside of it. Many have been subjected to it over the years. Romelu Lukaku and Mario Balotelli faced it in Italy. Kylian Mbappe faced it when France lost the World Cup last year. England's Marcus Rashford and Bukayo Saka faced it after the Euro 2020 final. Almost all black players face it in Spain. Like the infamous case of a banana being thrown at Dani Alves in 2014. It's pervasive. Token rules and procedures are unable to stop it. The Vinicius incident has put the spotlight back on Europe's deep-seated racism and what little effort it has made to course correct.
For our next story, let's talk about misery. They say misery loves company, and these days, miserable countries have lots of company. The distress of some is off the charts, but just enough to quantify. We're talking about the Misery Index. It has analyzed 157 countries and ranked them in order of how miserable they are. Zimbabwe has topped the list. It's a country in Africa home to about 16 million people. It has topped this list for 3 straight years now. Where does India stand? At number 103. And how is this list created? What can countries learn from it? Our next report tells you.
Misery finds most company in Zimbabwe. This African nation is home to about 16 million people, and it has been named the world's most miserable country. But we aren't saying this. The Misery Index is. It is formally called Hankey's Annual Misery Index. How does it work? It's an economic index. This index analyzes 157 countries, then gives a score to each of them. This score is based on unemployment, inflation, bank lending rates, and percentage change in GDP. This year's index has now been released, and top of this honor roll is Zimbabwe. The index blames the country's political turmoil for this. It says that Zimbabwe is mired in corruption. This has only aggravated a deepening economic crisis, and its troubles don't end there. Violence is rampant and widespread. Tens of thousands are descending into poverty. So all this doom has made Zimbabwe the gloomiest nation to live in. Who's next? Venezuela, Syria, Lebanon and Sudan. For Syria, it's their unemployment that is making it miserable. Not to mention its horrific civil war, which has been on for over a decade. As for the other 3 nations, Venezuela, Lebanon and Sudan, inflation is the biggest reason for their sad state of being. Where's India in all this? It stands at number 103. The main reason for this is unemployment. What about neighbouring Pakistan? It's dealing with both economic and political crisis, and it's only worsening by the day. The country ranks at 35. Yes, Pakistan is in the top 40 most miserable countries in the world. But that's no shocker. Here's one which might surprise you. Finland. It's the world's happiest country, yet it ranks 109th. Ironic, isn't it? But the fact is that the miserable index is about economic factors, which are connected to people's happiness. But they are not the only factors which bring us joy. As they say, money doesn't buy happiness. Let's put you out of your misery now and talk about the least miserable country in the world. It's Switzerland. We suspect the chocolates and cheese have something to do with it. Kuwait, Ireland, Japan and Malaysia make up the top 5 of the least miserable countries in the world. At this point, you must be wondering, what is the point of discussing this index? How does it help any country? Fact is that this miserable index is a good tool to compare countries. It tells us a lot about where people are happy versus where they are, well, miserable. The countries doing well are not just for holiday inspiration, though we won't hold it against you. They can tell us a lot about how to achieve countrywide happiness. We can compare metrics, learn more about mitigating misery, and understand how growing inflation, political turmoil and unemployment have drastic socio-economic consequences, one that can lead to constant distress, enough to top a misery list. This is the one list you'd not want to top, because while misery might love company, you'd be much better off without it.
For our last story tonight, let's try to lighten the mood a bit. Here are some questions for you. Why was the DJ a hit at vegetable parties? Because she dropped good beats. Why did the carrot go to the hairdressers? Its roots were showing. Why did the gossipy chef get fired? He couldn't stop spilling the beans. By now, you have probably guessed what our next story is about. It's about vegetables. But if these veggie jokes improved your mood, try eating more vegetables, because that will actually make you happier. And study after study says so. What we eat affects how we feel. So we can eat ourselves happy by consuming more greens. Let us tell you why. Pardon the pun. Here's a report.
Eat your greens, kids. How many times have you heard that before? Don't worry, we aren't here to force you to finish your broccoli. We'll just tell you why you should. Because what we stick in our mouths matters to our mental health. When we're feeling down, we gravitate towards junk food. When you're feeling blue, nothing tastes as good as that burger. But what we should be doing is the exact opposite. You should be eating greens instead to stay in the pink of health. For years, studies have said that eating vegetables can improve physical health. But did you know that they also improve our mental health? And it doesn't take much. Adding just one more serving of fruits or vegetables will do the trick. But if you need more reason to believe us, here are some recent findings for you. A study says higher consumption of fruits means more relaxation, confidence, and energy. Another study says 5 servings of vegetables a day not just keeps the doctor away, but also lowers the risk of depression by 19%. Eating 4 portions of fruits lowers the risk of depression by 25%. 18 studies have found that for every 100 grams of veggies, depression risks drop by at least 3%. And all of these findings are just the tip of the iceberg lettuce. We can keep going, but the crux of it all is this: fruit and vegetable consumption is linked to mental well-being. There are some differences though. Like in some countries, this link between greens and well-being is stronger than others. For example, in India, Russia, China, and Ghana. That's because of diet patterns that involve more vegetables or a healthier preparation style. What's more, vegans and vegetarians are less depressed than omnivores. Now, some studies contradict this fact, but most of them are funded by the meat industry. So, you get the idea. No matter the differences, vegetables make us happier. Question is, how? The obvious reason is substitution. When we load up on plants, our stomachs have less space for unhealthy foods, which are bad for our mental health. Sweets make us more nervous and panicky. They also make us feel hopeless. Junk food increases our risk of depression by 23%. So clearly, comfort food is discomforting in reality. Plants also give us more fiber. You already knew that. And fiber is good not just for the body, but also great for the brain, as it releases happy hormones like dopamine and serotonin. These regulate our mood and make us feel motivated. So, how do we make the switch? Start small by adding more vegetables and fruits to your meals. But if you don't like to eat vegetables, try experimenting. Have a rainbow diet, foods of different colors. Or try adding different herbs and spices. Because experts say any vegetable can be made delicious, even Brussels sprouts. You can even have fresh fruit juice. It's tasty and healthy. So find your own rhythm and slowly develop the habit of having more veggies. Take a stab at that Caesar salad. Or just keep calm and carrot on.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Bolivia. The country's parliament turned into a wrestling ring. Lawmakers were discussing the imprisonment of a conservative governor. One thing led to another, and lawmakers started throwing punches and pulling each other's hair. In the US, a cowboy chased a runaway cow on a highway in Michigan. And after Met Gala, here is Pet Gala, dogs and cats walking the red carpet in New York. And mind you, these are no ordinary pets. They're all Instagram stars. Finally, what makes the 24th of May significant? We're taking you back in history. On this day, in the year 2000, Israel withdrew from Lebanon. As the last troops pulled out of southern Lebanon, it ended 18 years of occupation. The 1982 Lebanon War is often referred to as Israel's Vietnam. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
You love your office.
A lot of my shows as well. Jared Leto surprised everybody. There was a lot of voice.
This is an insult to the first tribal woman president. The president is the head of the state, should be the one who is inaugurating this, not the prime minister who is the head of the government or the ruling party, but it's the head of the state who should be doing this.
You know, they are fighting against the Indian constitution. They are fighting against the parliamentary democracy. And they are fighting against the great tradition of this country. They are making everything controversial. Basically, constitutional offices are being made controversial by the opposition party. I'm asking a question. Why they have boycotted the president's address in the parliament? They have to answer to the nation. At every time, they created a controversy against the presidential office by boycotting the speeches. I'm asking the question that when Prime Minister Narendra Modi is leading a grand desire, a grand movement and campaign against that is decolonization of Indian mind. And it is surprising. There is a coincidence of commonality between Narendra Modi ji and Franz Fanon. Although he was a Marxist, Narendra Modi is a nationalist. There is a great compatibility between the two. Franz Fanon said that without eliminating every structure of the colonial period, which is a symbol of this sovereignty, you cannot create the decolonized state. And Prime Minister has done a great job. Second important thing is that when Prime Minister is inaugurating, opposition, I am reminding the opposition party, in 1975, Indira Gandhi inaugurated the parliamentary annexing. Then Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad was the Prime Minister. Should I ask that it was an insult of the Muslim Prime Minister? You are categorizing the presidential position as a tribal, as a Muslim. When Murmu became the presidential candidate, you just see the reaction of the opposition parties. Their reaction was not a positive and constructive. Therefore, I think that this is an opportunism. That opportunism is against the very, very ethos of the parliamentary democracy.
Okay, so let me ask Sushmita Dev this. Why this newfound love for Draupadi Murmu? When her candidature was proposed by the BJP, your party did not support it. In fact, you had propped up Mr. Yashwant Sinha as your candidate. When she addressed the first joint session of Parliament, your party had boycotted it. Why are you suddenly showing this new love for India's first tribal woman president? Because you never really, had a role to play in her becoming that.
I find the question very interesting because the debate today is on Pakistan.
A very warm welcome. You're watching Breaking on CNN News 18. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Let's begin with some breaking inputs coming in from West Bengal. We're now learning that the governor of West Bengal, Ananda Bose, has sent a show cause notice to 6 vice-chancellors of state-run universities. Remember, a couple of months ago, in the month of April, the governor's office sent a letter to all state-run universities to send weekly reports to the governor's office. These are the vice-chancellors who did not comply with that notice and therefore have received this show cause notice. Let's quickly go across to Kamalika Sen Gupta, who's joining me on the phone line. Kamalika, take us through this tussle that's been taking place for over 2 months now. Which are these 6 universities that we are talking about? And give us context to this fight.
There are various prominent universities of Bengal. Last month, we remembered that the governor, who happens to be the chancellor of the university, he had sent a letter to all the VCs, and he was asking for reports, weekly reports by the universities. The state government opposed it that point of time, but after that, after 1 month, now today, what we are coming to know from our sources, that Shidukanu University, Nozrul University, very prominent universities, VCs, who have not complied with the direction of the governor, has been served show cause notice by the governor of Bengal. Now, this is very much clear that the role which the governor as chancellor he wants to exercise, he is sticking to his point, no matter that is leading to a conflict between the state government and the governor. So that conflict between the state government and the governor is going to continue. That is clear, because not only that he has sent the letter and he wanted the report from the VCs, now that the VCs have failed to give that report,
right.
So-called notice have been served to 6 VCs.
And in fact, when we look at the tussle between the governor and the vice chancellor, as you were also in fact referring to one, it's important to highlight how this is almost a deja vu moment in West Bengal, because we've seen a similar tussle also go on between Jagdeep Dhankar and the vice chancellors.
Yeah, Jagdeep Dhankar was an open fight between the government and the governor. Till now, the governor and the government is not an open fight, but it is going to be an open fight now. Like the last month, when the governor he was asking for such report, then the education minister Dr. Bosu he came up with a statement that the governor, who is the chancellor of the university, does not have any right to seek such reports. So from that point, the governor did not react. The governor did not say the word when the education minister said that he does not have that right to ask for any report. What he did is, like 1 month passed, and when the reports were not coming, he, from his office, another show cause notice was sent. So that's quite clear that the governor, as a chancellor, is going to assert his role, and he is very clear what he wants to do, and he is going to continue way he is doing.
Kamalika, I'm going to request you to continue staying with us, because we have some more breaking inputs coming in, this time from Manipur. Remember, just when Manipur was in fact contemplating on relaxing the curfew, there's fresh violence that's taken place, and at least 1 person has lost his life and 1 is injured in separate incidents that took place in Vishnupur. Since the violence, indefinite curfew is imposed in several districts of Manipur. Lieutenant General R.P. Kalita, GOC-in-Chief, Eastern Command, have carried out a 3-day visit to review the ground security situation in the state. Let's quickly go across to Kamalika, who continues to stay with us. Kamalika, what is the ground situation? What's the sentiment like on ground zero? And what is the kind of pressure like on the government? Because let's not forget that the Home Department, in fact, comes under the Chief Minister.
Now, obviously, it's a big question, but at the same time, from Monday onwards, again, we are seeing that there in certain places, there are some incidents which is taking place. Like from yesterday, what we are getting, that there has been 4 arson incidents where the army and the Assam Rifles, they went there and the situation was brought under control. Firing took place in 2 places, and also in the valleys, also in the Poljang village. So this is also another thing that, you know, there has been attempt by the forces, by the paramilitary forces, by the government, but still some strong force is working so that the situation in Manipur does not fall in place. And today, none other than the Minister Govindas, his house was attacked. Now that is also a very big incident. That is really a concerning thing. But the sources in army and also the sources in administration are saying that don't fall into fake news and rumors. That is also doing the rounds. Though the net is still shut down, but there has been huge rumors have spread across the state. There has been an attempt by the army. There has been an attempt by the Central Paramilitary Forces, the government, to make things fall in place. Now, the violence has not got out of hand, but since yesterday, again, things are not in the right place in Manipur, and specifically when the minister's house was attacked today in the evening, that is a very concerning thing. And also what we come to know that a special helpline number,
right?
A special number is also have come up by the security advisor. Kuldeep Singh has come up with a number that if there is any rumor or any fake news or any such information, then anybody can call in that number and give that information. Manipur right now, we will not. You cannot say that it's quite violent, but situation is not as it was last week.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll be awaiting more inputs in terms of how the situation is panning out in Manipur at the moment. Many thanks to you, Kamalika Sen-Gupta, for bringing in all those details. And with that, let's now shift focus over to some more breaking inputs coming in this time. As far as the Parliament inauguration is concerned, it is, of course, the